So this week's topic of Amuna Mondays was the topic of God's kryptonite. So as soon as you hear that, you think like, what? What are you talking about? Like God's kryptonite. One, you're trying to say God would have then a weakness, and because like that's literally what kryptonite was to Superman. Was when kryptonite was in play, it was then taken out of, like it would take all his powers and abilities away. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's one. Like I'm actually talking about that, and I'm saying yes, that God does actually have a weakness, and it's super fascinating, and we'll elaborate on it. So I actually came up with this at a Friday night meal. We were just like sitting, eating, talking, and came up to the conclusion of like, whoa, Hashem's kryptonite, like God's kryptonite, is our ego. And it's super fascinating. So obviously it brings the the first question of like, God would then, you're trying to say that God has a weakness. That's sounds a bit ridiculous. And my response is no, like that God limits himself in this world. He limits himself when he's in this world, bounds himself by rules. He sets rules for himself, and that's the beauty and fascination of the type of like king that we have, that he will limit himself for our benefit. So you think, okay, what's so benefiting? The fact is, we have free will. What is free will? Free will is our ego. We have our ego. We can feed our ego as much as we want, and ultimately, the more that the ego is fed, the less acknowledgement and recognition that we give Hashem, which is hence kryptonite. And the less we inflate our ego, and the less we say that this is all done by me, and take it like, oh, I did this is all me, blah 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 blah, and you actually give credit to God and acknowledge that, you know what, you're in this position because of Hashem, you're in this position because of this, you got this because of Hashem. Like when you start acknowledging and recognizing Hashem, aka lowering down your ego, more of a, you then allow yourself more of a role, more of like a role given to Hashem. Like you now give him access to do more things for you. And again, he's not limited on those aspects. He limits himself from the aspect of, you have like you have your, what is it, like ego, you can let it and inflate it as much as you want, nobody's stopping you. And by doing that, you're just taking control, aka pushing God away. You're not allowing Hashem to then go above and beyond, or do or handle things the way he handles things. And it's and like that's the beauty of it. So like, yes, I am saying that Hashem is limited, and I'm referring to the fact of he limits himself. He creates a limit for himself and for our benefit, aka free will, because we're not robots. We weren't put in this world to just be cookie cutters and do all the same thing. It's supposed to have a personal feel to it, a personal like twist on it. And I feel like that's what we're in this world for. And the only type of twist that we can get is from our ego. Our ego is what personalizes each person. And that's, again, that's something that I feel like when, like I heard when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, that what they accessed was their ego. Their ego was right then and there accessed, resulting in the reality of, oh my gosh, whoa, I'm not wearing clothes, this, that, all these things came about from it, and that all came from ego. So like ego, yeah, it would then be technically a negative thing, but we have the potential to make it into a good thing. Again, having an ego is not terrible, but at the end of the day, the more ego you have, the less of a role you allow Hashem to play. And it's and like with that, it's a super like fascinating way to look at it, of like, you have to leave things up to, like, some things are left up to God, but at the end of the day, you do have to do your part. You have to go and get out there and work, go get a job. And at the end of the day, the job is not what's bringing money. It's the fact that Hashem commands us to go and work. It's like it's an actual commandment. That was like the punishment that Adam had, was now men would now have to work for what you want. You got to work for it. And it's just like really fascinating that like our ego is what limits God, and God is limitless. He has no limits. But when we take an egotistical route towards it, we then put a cap on God and honesty, and ultimately actually push him away. And it's super fascinating to think about, and there's so many aspects that it can be like dove into. And I'm trying to think of like what was mentioned yesterday in the actual class, because I do know that we expanded on it pretty well. I believe like we also took the route of understanding what you want. Like Hashem listens to every single thing. He does. He listens to every single thing that you say. You could say something 10 years ago, Hashem listened to it. So you should really watch what you say, and two, honestly, have a deep try to really understand what you're asking for, because I don't think people understand what we ask for, like what it entails. Like if somebody says like, oh, I want to be a billionaire, you have to understand, in order to be a billionaire, you're not just walking on, you're not just chilling in the park. You're probably going to work like 20 hours a day, 6 days, if not 7 days a week. All these things, you're going to like, you're just going to put a lot of that work. You're not going to have holidays. You're not going to go on vacations. You're not getting luxury clothes, all these things, blah, blah, blah. Like people don't actually understand what a billionaire entails, or a motivational speaker, or all these things, like a rabbi or a teacher or a student. There's still all these goals people have. They don't actually understand every single aspect of what it entails, and then resulting in it when things aren't going to all green and all happy, results in us kind of getting bummed out and like, what the heck, what is God doing, this and that, and then pushing God away. Ultimately, you have to realize whatever you want is completely doable. There's nothing limited. God's not limited by anything, from the aspect of you can ask for and be whatever you want to be, and it's completely possible. Especially because, and then even when things don't look like they're going that route, you have Hashem on your side. So the likeliness that you'll succeed is pretty up there. You just have to make sure to do your part. But it's super fascinating. I think it was a really great topic of Kryptonite. Is like Hashem's kryptonite, which was super, like at first so many people were like, yo, you can't really say that, like that's limiting God. That's honestly saying that Hashem has a weakness. And when you actually think of it, he limits himself, and that's the beauty of Hashem, and having a creator that puts a cap on himself for our benefit. That's how much he loves us. And the benefit is the fact of free will. You're not a robot. You do have choices. Ultimately speaking, you should understand that Hashem is guiding us for the best, and most of the time our choices only end up causing more heartache and pain. But that's the beauty of free will, that we have the choice, but we should ultimately be able to then make the decision that we'll trust Hashem. And that's the thing. So it's actually super fascinating, and hope you enjoyed.